To enforce their authority over others and keep their institutions filled at profitable levels, psychiatrists use a method called involuntary commitment.
When you go to a real doctor, say a family doctor or a cardiologist, a patient always has the right to refuse treatment. So there is no such thing as involuntary treatment when it comes to clinical medicine as practiced by real doctors. Psychiatrists, of course, believe that people can be treated against their will.
In 1956, psychiatrist Winfred Overholser presented a plan to Congress intended to take involuntary commitment to a whole new level. The plan: purchase 1 million acres of Alaskan wilderness, build a huge mental asylum, and change the commitment laws so that anyone could be shipped off with no more than a simple nod from a psychiatrist. The bill sailed through the House of Representatives, but when the public caught wind of the plan, they became enraged, referring to it as Siberia, USA. The bill was quickly struck in the Senate. But while the death of the Siberia bill put a stop to their large-scale plans, involuntary commitment still remained the most effective and profitable method for filling psychiatric institutions.
Again, the person has committed no crime and has no trial and is sent directly to a mental hospital, which is really a prison.
How many people go to an insane asylum and say, please lock me up? Doctors don't lock up anybody. Psychiatrists lock you up.
Even children can be taken from their parents with little legal recourse.
They just invaded our home. They came in with officers. Our kids were scared. You know, they come in with pieces of paper and say, you're giving us your kids. And it's like, you know, how can they just come in and do that?
She said, you could be arrested for medical neglect. And I said, but how is that when, you know, this is my child? And I see that he doesn't need that much medication. Why would you threaten me with something like that?
At 10 p.m., 2 policemen and 2 social workers came to my house and took all 4 of my kids away.
Once committed to psychiatric hospitals, patients are drugged and restrained.
The more a person objects, the more this objection is construed as symptom of a mental illness.
At which point the person would be locked up in restraints. There would be the ankle, the knee, the waist, the head, the wrist, and the shoulder restraints. And if when that process was happening, if there was almost any resistance at all, the person then would be medicated to a point where they would almost be knocked out.
We had one case where they actually took a patient in a seclusion room and beat him up. And then they lied about it to the services that investigated. So it's a pretty wide range of abuse issues that we've encountered.
Psychiatric staff provoke their patients into violence so they can bill insurance companies up to $1,600 a day for each restrained patient.
A patient would resist diagnosis, resist treatment, and also want to leave treatment while they were at the hospital. And invariably, every time, that person's situation would be exacerbated until they were put in constraints and medicated, at which point there would be documented reasons to keep that person in treatment.
The burden of such claims is passed directly to the public in the form of soaring healthcare premiums. As for their victims, the experience is traumatic and even lethal.
16-year-old Rochelle Claiborne died in Laurel Ridge's care last August. The state report shows during the restraint, quote, Rochelle stated several times she could not breathe.
In almost all respects, the staff behaved appropriately, followed the standards.
By taking advantage of weak or vague restraint laws, psychiatrists and their staff are almost never held criminally liable for assault, battery, and murder.
He begged me to take him home, take him out of there, that they were treating him wrongly, and he didn't want to stay there. And I got a call that there had been an accident, that they held him down until he couldn't breathe anymore. I wish I would have listened to him, take him out of there before it had happened. And then I miss him every day. And I wish I could have him back, but I can't.
To this day, no one has been charged for the child's murder. The elderly are a prime target for psychiatric abuse, with treatment of senior citizens in mental institutions costing private and government insurance over $29 billion a year.
unwarranted commitment has occurred that wouldn't have occurred if the people hadn't had insurance. The proof of that pudding is generally in how fast they get out once the insurance runs out.
Involuntary commitment is a form of psychiatric slavery, where persons are treated as if they're property and they are deprived of liberty, and people are making money in the process.
As long as we have involuntary mental hospitalization, psychiatry is a prison work. It's a crime against humanity. It is not medicine.
Every minute of every day, someone is involuntarily committed to a psychiatric institution. And if you think this is something that can't happen to you or someone you know, think again. Every 75 seconds, someone in America has been committed against their will. And with over $1 trillion allocated to U.S. hospitals since 1965, psychiatrists have carved out for themselves a lucrative commercial enterprise, hidden behind a dubious interpretation of the law. But all too often, psychiatrists commit crimes too blatant to be ignored.
The FBI has raided the headquarters of one of the nation's largest operators of psychiatric hospitals.
Hundreds complained of overbilling, misdiagnosed conditions, and insurance fraud.
Investigators say they found more than 5,000 similar cases in all 50 states.
Psychiatrists clearly are getting rich.
Psychiatrists traded drugs for sex, filed false insurance claims, and exploited patients sexually.
We have uncovered some of the most elaborate, aggressive, creative, deceptive, immoral, and illegal schemes being used to fill empty hospital beds with insured and paying patients.
Every psychiatrist takes an oath to follow an ethical code of conduct, to put the care of their patients above all else. But of all medical disciplines, psychiatry has the worst record of fraud and abuse.
Psychiatry is almost a license to print money. If a doctor were clever enough, and many of them are, there's no reason that they couldn't make at least $500,000 a year fraudulently and get away with it in psychiatry.
I don't purport to have deposed every psychiatrist in Las Vegas. I can tell you for a fact I haven't. Maybe I've deposed half. And by and large, they were a dishonest, deceitful, lying bunch of people.
So prevalent are their deceptive and criminal billing practices. Insurance investigators have slang for it, like the California wave and the $100 handshake.
$100 handshake is when usually a patient is institutionalized. Psychiatrists, psychologists will visit that person, shake hands with them, say, hello, I'm Dr. So-and-so, I'm taking care of your problem here, and then leaves.
They might have 10 or 20 patients there. They bill an hour for each one, and they might be in the hospital for a total of 30 minutes. So 20 patients, 20 hours, and they'd send the bills off to Medicaid.
We see that most of the victims of recovered memory therapy were women who had excellent health insurance, whether it was government insurance or private insurance, because many insurance policies wouldn't pay for this kind of long-term nonsense. So those people were targeted because of the nature of the insurance that they had.
Every year, the U.S. psychiatric industry defrauds government and private insurance of $40 billion, using any means possible to deceive the public.
There were some advertisements, very seductive advertisements, for people wanting to lose weight and were having problems losing weight. And they would be given, all expenses paid to go to a particular spa. But when they got to this spa and went in and signed in, it wasn't a spa, it was a psychiatric center. And then they couldn't get out.
What instead they received is they received massive doses of mind-altering drugs, and they were kept for a lengthy period of time, and their insurance carrier was billed tremendous amounts of money for something that was unnecessary.
But their lies go beyond the psych ward and into the courts, where as paid witnesses, they will say anything to collect their fee.